All right, good evening, friends. So I've seen a few people requesting help with shipbuilding, just general shipbuilding principles. I think a lot of people are relatively new to the field and trying to figure out how to build their own ships and struggling with it. I saw at least one person request basically just a video start to finish of how to build a ship. So I'm going to do that today. I'm going to build something fairly small and fairly basic. I don't want to get into too much in the way of voxel work and design. I feel like that kind of fancy aesthetic stuff is enough topics for videos of their own. But I just want to get the basic fundamental functionality down. So my base is an absolute wreck right now, so I've got just a whole bunch of random crap thrown in a container here. So I'm just going to grab one of these. We're going to go with a small core. So for starters, we place our core. I'm going to pull it up off the ground a little bit, because give me some room to work. And generally, my advice for starting a new build is the first thing you want to do is figure out what you're going to do with it. Like if you're trying to build something that is functional, then you need to make sure that it's going to actually suit that function. So right now I'm doing a functional build, so I'm going to focus on what it can do. If you want to design something that looks really cool, then you might want to start with some aesthetic features and start building from there, and then build out once you have those features in place. But for this, if you're just looking to build something like a little hauler or a DSAT ship, whatever, start with your core, what you need to do with it. So what I want to do right now is I want to make a basic daily driver, something that can handle a couple hundred tons, nothing too big. Has a warp drive in it in case I want to hop over to another planet. Can handle both Atmo and space. And mostly I want to do that just because I feel like it'll give a good rundown of a lot of the different elements that might be involved. So first thing I'm going to do, because I know I don't need that much space and I want it to look reasonably okay, like one medium container would probably be sufficient, but honestly one medium container is kind of ugly. It's kind of hard to build something that looks nice out of that. So I tend to build a lot of element only ships, but I like them to look reasonably okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some small containers and I'm going to hub them. So we're just going to go, if you're looking to rotate things, if you point at the surface and then hold R and scroll the mouse wheel, it goes a click at a time, and each click is, I forget how many degrees exactly, but 4 gives you a 45-degree angle. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, I get a nice 45-degree angle. And I'm going to just pop this out, I don't know, 24, 28? Why not? X28. And we're going to push it out near the front of the ship. This is going to be kind of a similar design to another ship that I have already. So we're going to place that there. And then if you hold control and hit page down after you hit enter, then it goes, you can continue to move it. And it's based on how you were originally pointing it. So because I was originally pointing it against the surface, that is down. So page down pushes it in that way. So I can go there, 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 there. And then if I turn to this angle, now left will move left. I'm currently at x equals 28. Now I want to go 28 the other way, so we'll just pop it over there until we get to 28. And I want to rotate it the other way for symmetry, so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll put this one here, there, 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 there. And that's my containers. It's a little wider than I thought it would be, but you know what? It's fine. Now we're going to get a hub, which apparently I only have one. I need to deal with that. Last hub. Here we go. Now, when you put containers and hub them, the hub itself will become the point in which all of the mass of the contents is centered. So you really want this hub to be wherever your center of mass is going to be. An important ship design principle is that basically your steering depends on your center of mass. If you have an adjuster and it applies a force, that force will spin your ship around your center of mass. When you add things to your ship, your center of mass changes to move towards where that mass is. In build mode, you can see that center of mass is currently here. So that's fine. But then if I open up one of these containers, which is actually just all of the containers, and I drop something in there, something relatively heavy, boom, suddenly that center of mass drops way back in the ship because it's going towards this guy. It's going towards the container hub. So right now I don't have enough stuff in the ship yet to really have a sense of where exactly my center of mass is going to be. So I'm going to leave it there for now, and then I will move it to be closer to the center of mass once I have a sense of what that means. So I probably want to get out of the way some heavier elements. So let's get some atmospheric engines. I don't know, what have I got? I got some basics, I got some uncommon militaries, some uncommon safes. Safe atmospheric engines aren't very good. Safe space engines are okay, though. So I don't know, we'll go for militaries. So let's just pop a couple of these on here for now. I have like kind of a general sense of how much mass I want to do. Engines are about 8 wide. 8.5 actually, so here I put one at 8 and then I had to put the other one at 8.5 because it wouldn't fit at 8 and 8. So for symmetry I like to put them both at 8.5, so technically leaves a little gap in the middle, but then they're at the same spacing. And then for space engines, generally a tier up of an engine is worth about 5 of the smaller tier, and a space engine you need about 3/5 or so of the number of engines as Atmo engines if you want to have an equivalent amount of thrust, because they just generate more thrust. So I have 2 large Atmo engines, so that's equivalent of about 10 mediums, so 3/5 would be about 6. Is my math line up? So it's somewhere around there. You'll want to get a look at what it actually is going to be. Now I don't have any medium militaries, so I'm probably going to have to use just some basics. Or I could plop a large military in and then add some basics. So why don't we do that? So let's go for a large uncommon military. Because I'm going to do just one large space engine, I'm actually going to move the atmospheric engines instead. So we're going to put the space engine in the middle, so we're going to get a sense of where that's going to be. We're going to put it here. Now I'm going to want it at z equals 0, but right now there's no room. So we'll drop it up here. And then what we do is switch to the move tool, which is 9, and just push these guys over to make room, and then bring this guy down until he's at 0, and then push these guys back in. And honestly, just go until they turn red, and then go back 1. Red, blue. And then just confirm x equals 13, x equals 13, make sure they're the same. Not all elements are completely symmetrical, so you can very easily end up in a situation where they don't line up properly. So there we go. There we have it. Now that's not going to be enough because it's not a 2-to-1, so we're going to throw some basics in there as well. So we're just going to go here, again, go till it turns red, back up 1. And we'll go with, yeah, sure, why not? 6 medium engines. Oh, nope, that's it. We're done. Okie dokie. So here, we've got a large space, 6 large mediums, 2 large Atmos. That's looks like a pretty good amount of engine power. So, let's see. My goal had been to handle around a couple 100 tons. So I'm going to sort by mass, high to low, and find something heavy. So let's drop some iron in there. That's 549 tons. Sure, why not? We'll shoot for that. 550 tons. That's my goal. I want it to be able to haul 550 tons. I highly advise, if hauling a certain value is what you want to do this. Put it in the container and then have it there and just leave it there for the rest of your building. Because now what you need to do is take a look at your stats. So now I can see my max thrust on my engines, my Atmo engines, is 1.58 Gs. That is more than enough. It's not spectacular. If you want something to handle really well, I'd suggest trying to push up to more like 2. But really, anything over 1 is going to be okay. But again, the tighter it is, the less smooth it's going to handle, basically. If you really overpower it, then things will handle better. Space 2.17. That's great. But now I'm not actually done building the ship yet. I still have quite a bit of mass that I need to add. So let's start doing that. So next thing I'm going to want is the warp drive that I mentioned. So, oh, I've got a damaged one. We'll use that one. So we're going to pop that here. Warp drives, for whatever reason, are centered 6 voxels below where their actual center is. I don't know. So you need to... It's going to look weird if you start trying to move it to at exactly the value that you want. This is 0, 0. Clearly that's not right. So you're going to want to just go down to -6. However, that does actually lower the center of mass a little bit. So if you notice, this line here is now below the center line. So if I backspace that to take the engine away, or the warp drive away again, you see it goes up a little bit. And then if you hit equals, that puts it back. That's undo and redo. And there you can see. Now, in order for warp drive to work, it has to have a feed from the container. So we'll just do that. Feed it in there. Now, if you put the warp cells in here, you got warp cells. Next heavy thing we're going to need is fuel. Based on... I really like to build my builds symmetrically, based on how many fuel tanks there are, because it's handy to be able to have your fuel burn down at the same rate. I didn't do that here. I have just one large space engine, and the rest are mediums. And the large is going to burn more than the mediums are. It might end up being kind of similar, actually. Actually, let's check. So, space engine... so I used an uncommon large. It burns fuel at a rate of 4,300 liters per hour. So let's keep that number in mind, 4,300. Basic medium burns at 622, and I added 6 of them. So 622 times 6 is 3,600 plus 22 times 6, 37, 28, 26? 3732. 3,732, if my mental math is correct, which is probably not, but it's probably in the right ballpark. And this one's 4,300. So yeah, the large one is going to burn a little bit faster than the medium ones, but it's not as bad as I thought. And in fact, adding a 7th one would actually balance it out to be pretty darn close. But I don't know where I'd put it. It would look weird if I put it anywhere, so I'm not going to do that, but could do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 space fuel tanks. This is partially based on experience here, because I know that like one medium fuel tank here, each fuel tank can fuel 10 engines. So one medium fuel tank could fuel all of my engines, but I know it would run dry fast. That would be a really heavy drain. As it is, 2 mediums is probably going to be a little on the tight side. There is talk of them implementing some sort of... Now that's interesting. It's in exactly the same spot, but it doesn't fit. I don't think I got it flat. So that's something else to be aware of in ship builds. Sorry, I'm gonna finish what I was saying. There's talk of some sort of fuel sharing system, of like letting fuel share between fuel tanks. It's not implemented yet, so we don't really know what it's gonna look like. But it was mentioned as something that's coming. So hopefully we'll be able to do something here, like have, say, a small fuel tank on each of them, and then one large fuel tank that pushes fuel into the 2 small ones. So that way you can have just small ones for connections, basically, and then a large one for the actual storage, and keep that one central. Because honestly, Kurgan is heavy, so it actually throws off the balance of your ship if you put it weird. So here, if I just put it here, oh yeah, back to this thing. So when you're pointing at a surface that you want to attach to, it isn't necessarily flat. So here, this looks flat, but it might not be. You can see here, if I move over here, you hit some weird edges and suddenly it's really not flat. And it's actually sometimes difficult to tell if it really is flat or not. However, there's these little magnet thing down here. If you point over top of that, then it is definitely flat. So I like to use those as my reference point. So here we'll go 9. And again, doesn't fit. So something is slightly out of whack. So... Oh, never mind. It's not that it doesn't fit. It's that I'm using a damaged one, so I don't have enough. Also, if you move something in place, you can actually select a different element and place that instead. So here I could be like, oh, actually, let's do a large one. But I'm not going to actually do that because that's ridiculous. So there we are. So now I will have one of these feed that one, and then this one feed the rest of them. Now, space fuel tanks also handle vertical boosters. So I'm probably going to need to have a couple of vertical boosters on this. If you're working in space, sometimes you'll find that you're technically boarded on a ship, and so it won't let you maneuver it. So just sidebar, bonus content. If you step away from it a little bit and then hit Alt-Y, you deboard. Now you can maneuver. Move it up so high it's hard to reach. Alright, so we're going to grab some vertical boosters, and I'm going to link them to the same container, or the same fuel tank that I did the medium engines on, because I know that the medium engines aren't going to be burning as fast. So which one is this? That's the big one, so that's the medium ones. So it's already connected to 6, so that's 7, 8, 9. So that one's almost capped out now. And then Atmo fuel tanks, again, we'll just do 2. Atmospheric fuel is a lot lighter than space fuel. So you don't necessarily have to be as careful balance-wise with atmospheric fuel tanks as you do with space fuel tanks. 16.5, then over here we'll go up to 16.5. Get another one. Got a lot of damaged elements from crashes. One there, and then just because I have 2, I'm just going to try throwing 2 hover engines on just to balance that out. Maybe 4? I don't know, let's find out. Let's see how the Spirit moves. So, yeah, sure, 1 there. 1 there. Yeah, Spirit's moving for 2 currently. And then each of them is on 1 tank. Okay, so now we have some space engines, we have some Atmo engines, we have some vert boosters, we have some hover engines. So now let's see what our stats say as we stand here. Oh, I guess I have to go back and go. So we're going to go to the Spaceflight Engineer. So my spaceflight thrust has dropped down to 1.9 Gs. That is still satisfactory. Should still be fine. My max speed has dropped down to 32,000 kilometers an hour because of all of my mass. That's okay though. Low altitude lift, 2.59 Gs. Plenty. That's tons. Space, or atmospheric flights. So low altitude lift, 3.55 Gs. So that will count both the hovers and the vert boosters. So the hovers only handle 0.96 right now, so it will need the vert boosters to get enough thrust. That is okay. At least for on Alioth. If you're on a lighter planet, technically the hover engines would be enough, but so far no one's built a script that just uses hovers instead of using vert boosters. Put that on my bucket list. Max thrust is 1.38 Gs. Getting a little low, but it's still okay. Given that it's getting a little low, and I'm using so few connections, it might make sense to maybe add in a couple extra engines, just a little something something. Maybe a couple of medium engines. So I've got some advanced freight engines here, so let's use those suckers. Just because freights are really light and really fuel efficient, so adding these in won't add much to my fuel consumption. Alright, so we're just going to tack these in over here. There, sure. 45 for 0. Boom. Good. And then just control an arrow over. Rotate it around. Bring her back in. 45. Now, that's interesting. So this one's at 36. This one's at 37. Intriguing. This one's at 24. This one's at 23. Interesting. So, now if I try and back this one to 23, see, I didn't check them for balance when I placed them. So I'm just going to shuffle them out. I'm not sure why one is letting me get tighter than the other one. But you know what? It's fine. I'll just shuffle them out for balance. It's okay. So here and here, and now the space flight 1.57. That's a little better. All right. Next thing I'm going to suggest is wings. You want some high altitude lift, so we're going to hop into wing, not wings. I've got 12 medium wings. My gut tells me that I'm probably going to want 8, just for symmetry's purposes. I think 4 won't be enough. But let's take a look. So if I take this wing here and I put it here, we get 0.26 Gs of high altitude lift from that. So 4 would put us just over 1, which is not really as much as we want. So yeah, let's go for 8. So put one there, one there, one there. And that's at x equals 30.5, and y is 49. So here we'll go bump the y down to 49, and the x was 30.5, I think. So we'll tuck that up until it touches. Alright, now let's quickly check. Z is 6.5, Z is 6.5, Z is negative 7.5, Z is negative 7.5. Cool, we're symmetrical. And our high altitude lift is now 2.05 Gs, which is much nicer. Next thing, the thing that I often forget, I've had to land entirely too many ships without these, is brakes. So we're going to grab some large atmospheric air brakes. And we'll go for 13, because I know that's where the engine is centered. And let's slap 2 of these on there and see what that does. So that's 3 Gs. That's not bad. But if you're wanting to parachute land, it's not really enough. So let's stack a few more on there. Let's just put them down here for fun. Doesn't really matter. Also 13. Alright, now we are up to 6 Gs. 6 Gs should be okay. 6 Gs, you should be able to parachute land. Alright, now let's take a look at space brakes. Current space brake force, 0. So, I just happen to know that small containers fit medium space brakes really well, so we're going to do that. That's 0.9 Gs, so I'm just going to layer them across all of my containers. Solid. Alright, so brake force is now 3.55 Gs, and it's starting to look a bit like a ship. Alright, so now some things to notice. My center of gravity is in the warp drive, which is inconvenient. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to turn my warp drive sideways and just shuffle it back a bit here. And now I can push my core back. Actually, the core can go anywhere. I can drop that down here so it's not obstructing my view of my fancy warp drive. And then we can put this right there. Oh, of course, because I moved the container hub back, the center of gravity moved back too. So see here, I moved it back to where the center of gravity is, but that also shuffled my center of gravity back because the mass of the container represents such a high proportion of the weight of the actual ship. So I'm going to have to actually move it back substantially further, which means this warp drive is probably going to be in the way again. So actually, I'm just going to tuck this guy up here, and then we're going to go here, we're going to go here. We're going to push him all the way back to the space engine. Okay, so we're not quite perfectly there. That's not bad. And then we'll push our warp drive back down. I like my hub to be accessible, so I'm going to just shuffle this forward a little bit. To give some room to get in here, to get at the hub. That also pulls my center mass forward a little bit more, so now my container hub is pretty much right on it. In fact, I can just pop it out. And then pop it back down half a voxel. Or maybe a whole voxel. Of course, I'm not done putting things on the ship yet, but I've got most of the mass on the ship at this point. So this should be pretty close to accurate. So now you see where my center mass is. It's just at the bottom of this container hub. Just in front of it. So if I take this and I take all of that out, it shuffles down here. So that tells me, actually, that I can probably shuffle this down here. And now it'll be even closer. There we go. Barely moved. Great. So now we have a fairly consistent center of mass. That center of mass is at negative 2.5. So I should have done this earlier, because actually now what probably makes sense to do is to actually move these containers down a little bit. So I'm actually going to strip these engines off, or the brakes rather. Now the containers themselves represent a pretty small portion of the mass of the ship. So moving these down isn't going to shuffle the center of gravity too much. Now I'm doing this because I'm going to put adjusters on these containers, and you really want your adjusters to be balanced towards the mass of the ship. I'm also going to shuffle these guys down a little bit, so we're going to push this guy out, this one out, oop. This one out, these guys down. Not that much, but just a little bit, just to pull their center of mass down a little bit, because otherwise they're going to be pulling it up a lot. So just trying to sort of balance things out a little bit better. And now we're back to the brakes. Let's do that again. Sometimes it takes a second. Get a bit of lag. It takes a second for it to figure out what's happening. Alright, so now we have our brake power back, we got our thrust, we got our low altitude lift, we got our high altitude lift, we have Atmo engines, we have space engines, we got brakes of both varieties. So basically, this sucker can now do everything but turn. So, adjusters. I did a video on adjuster placement at one point, and wings. There's a few cool little tips and tricks there that's worth checking out. But in a nutshell, basically what you want for adjusters is you want them to be balanced and you want them to actually make sense. So here, an interesting thing about how adjusters work. Here we are. Okay, good, I've got some. So basically, if I take an adjuster here and I put it at x equals 0, my center of gravity is at x equals 0. So this is going to provide no roll force. None at all. It is aligned pointing straight at the center mass vector on the y-axis. So basically this will handle a lot of pitch, which is your ship basically tilting up and down. There's 3 axes of rotation. So there's pitch, there's roll, which is pretty intuitive, and then there's yaw, which is basically like turning left and right, like if you were turning a car. So this is pointing straight down at the y-axis, so it's going to give us some pitch, though not a lot because it is pretty close to the center of mass. It's going to give us no roll, and it's going to give us no yaw, because it's not pointing to the left or right at all, right? It's directly in line with the Z and the X-axis, so it's not going to give us any of those things. So you want to push them a little bit further out. So here, if I were to push it out here, find a nice flat spot here, now, because I'm so far out on the X-axis, it's going to give me some roll. So if I fire that adjuster, I'll roll to the right a bit, which is cool. But obviously it won't be terribly balanced. It's going to roll to the right. It's also going to pitch back a little bit. And it might even have a little bit of yaw, though I don't think so. No, probably not. Now, something I see a lot of people do, which is a big mistake, in my opinion, is trying to put them, because you're trying to keep them on the surface of your ship, if you've got like a nice curved outer shell, is to put them like this. Now this adjuster here is notable because you're actually now pointing closer towards the center of axis, so this is actually going to roll less, substantially less, than if it was here, which does extend to even less than if it was positioned here. Because here, at this angle, basically a quick check that you can do is you can see this line here, this line that it's making, should be pointing at the center of mass. Because if it is, then that means that when you fire this adjuster, all of that force is going to be going towards rolling the ship. If you have it tilted, then some of it's going to be going towards rolling the ship, but some of it's just going to be lost. To the point where if you go all the way over here and point the flat bottom right at the center of mass, it's not quite perfect here, but almost no roll force is going to get exerted by this adjuster. Because basically, you fire the adjuster and it pushes this way. And if this is your center of mass, it's pushing here. So you'll roll a tiny bit, because you're just kind of tilting a little bit. But if you fired it like this way, so it pushed this way, then it's like, whoom, and you roll, right? So you got to make sure you get those adjusters in the right location for what you want them to do. Often you want to make sure that you have some at the front and some at the back in order to get your balance proper. So you can do that. You can do like a four corners approach. So if you put them on the back front, like back left, back right, front left, front right, on the top and bottom, which I guess is 8 corners, then like if you want to pitch forward, then the top front left and right will both fire, and the back bottom left and right will both fire, and you'll pitch your ship. Whereas if you want to roll, then like the top left ones and the bottom right ones will fire at the same time, so these ones will push it down and these ones will push it up, and it will like roll the ship, right? I've discovered that a little trick that I find quite entertaining, which is to put them here. If your ship is fairly well balanced, your mass is pretty far back, then these are far from your center of gravity, which gives you some good lever action. And they're oriented such that if you fire these two and these two, they'll cancel out each other's roll and just pitch the ship, right? If you fire these two and these two, then they'll cancel each other's pitch and just roll the ship. If you fire these two and these two, they'll cancel out each other's pitch and roll and just yaw. So just with these 8 adjusters here, you now have full yaw, pitch, and roll control. Now if you take a look at the inertia matrix, you'll see that these numbers on the center axis are, like on the identity axis, are very high, 11 million, 6.4 million, 14 million. And on the other axes, they're pretty low. So this one is 254K, which will probably be noticeable, but compared to 6.4 million, it's a tiny fraction. So now, We have brakes. We can go, we can stop, we can turn, and we're carrying stuff. We can lift, so we should be okay to fly. So I'm just going to throw a quick little hovercraft seat controller on here, if I can find one. I'm going to throw arches on it. That's my HUD of choice at the moment. Which means I'm also going to want a data bank, because I like having my stuff stored. Take one of these ones that's got data on it already, because I probably don't care about whatever's on there. So we're going to hook it up. We're going to hook it up to the warp drive, and then we're going to run the configure. Arches should connect to the core itself, so that's fine. And now if I hop in here... Oh, you know what? I didn't get...
complete.
Fuel.
System shutdown complete.
Get back out. Oh no! Clipped through. Okay, so you gotta watch out for that. If you get on something on a space station and then the ship falls, you get back out in the same place you were, and then you're docked to the ship, and then as it falls, it will push you right through the voxel work of other stuff. So I've fallen down to the planet a few times from that mistake. Not on this space station, but on previous ones. Now, just for curiosity's sake, now that I've filled up one side, not the other side, if I go to build mode, you'll see the center of gravity is a little bit off to that side now, because that Kurgan's actually pretty heavy. Even though I put it pretty close to the middle, it'll still have an effect. And I put it pretty close to the middle because if I pushed it out here, so it's further from the middle, you see it makes a much bigger effect. So, something to watch out for.
Startup complete.
So hit G to take off, she picks up. Brakes are active. I'm going to cut the brakes so we can just float here. I don't use toggle brakes, so I'll just flutter them to come to kind of a stop hovering here. So here it should give me just a little bit of vert booster power. Now, quick test. Yaw. Nice and even. Feel that? Oh. A little off there. Still not too bad. Pitch. Some good pitch control. And roll. The roll feels a little weak, and that's honestly probably because the adjusters are closer to the middle of the ship than they are towards the front of the ship. So they're further away forward from the center of gravity. So my yaw and pitch controls work pretty good. But my roll, because they're actually kind of tight to the middle, the roll doesn't work as strongly. So something to be aware of. I don't think it's a problem. Alright, so let's set her down. Let's try to set her down. Landing on space stations is a nightmare sometimes.
System shutdown complete.
Okay, so some other things that are good to have. Oh, right. Yeah, no, I'm standing on it, so I can't lift it. So, boop. Boop. Okay, so at this point you can start getting a little fancier. So if you wanted to have some landing gear, say, you could do that. Could just pop them here next to the brakes. Just kind of pretty close to the center of gravity, so she can kind of just perch. So it's 13 and 13. Just a damaged one, so I have to select a new one. There we are, that's nice. Normally I do some at the front too, but honestly there's not really a great spot for them here, so whatever, it's fine. Okay, some other things that's good to have. An emergency control unit. They don't do anything if you like disconnect from the game, like if your power goes out or your internet goes out, they're not going to be helpful. But if you just get out of your seat, it can be handy to have them try to land the ship for you. So frequently when I'm coming into land somewhere, I'll be coming into land, I'll be like 100 meters off the ground or whatever, I'll just be like, whatever, and I just get out and walk away. And the emergency controller will just finish landing the ship for me. Super handy. So if I'm like going to calibrate mining units, I'll be like flying in over my mining units and come into land, and yeah, like 100, 200 meters up. I've done it as far as 1 kilometer up before, where I'll just get out, jump off the ship, drop down, keep working. I wouldn't advise going any more than 1 kilometer because that's about the max range in which the control unit will still work. If you get too far away, eventually what will happen is the emergency control unit will unload, and you'll stop piloting the ship, but you're still close enough for the physics to work, and it will fall out of the sky and go kaboom. So don't do it for more than 1 kilometer, but and even 1 kilometer is obviously a little bit risky, but yeah, you can just hop out and it will land the ship for you if it can. It'll just try and parachute land it. So if there's like uneven terrain or something, it might get wonky and roll, but as long as it's fairly flat, it's pretty reliable. General shipbuilding principles, in my opinion, you want a resurrection node. So that you can res yourself. Like fast travel back to your ship, basically. You want a surrogate pod. At least you want a VR station so that you can VR out somewhere. So if you're out somewhere and you don't know where you're going, someone knows who I'm talking to, then you can get in this and VR to wherever you're going, get map location, whatever. That's fine. And also you can throw a surrogate pod on there, and now other people can VR to your ship. Obviously, this is not the classiest way of assembling it. Having, you know, a floor would be nice, but like I said, that's for another day. This is just to get it working. Alright, so now we have 550 tons in the hold. We have 1.64 Gs of space thrust, which is still okay, but getting a little low. Max speed 30,000, so we're not down to the bottom yet. Low altitude lift 2.24, so that's our vertical boosters, can get us off of a space station very easily, as we just saw. Brake force 3.22, that's fine. It's not stellar. I might add a few more brakes. Atmospheric flight characteristics, max thrust is 1.64, that is okay. It's not... Oh, sorry, hang on. I was like, that number looks familiar. 1.36 for max thrust for Atmo, so that will be a little bit slow to get moving. It's not bad, but it'll be a little bit slow. Brake force is 5.37. Getting a little low. It's okay. But I mean, this is at the max capacity for the ship, right? How to lift is 1.81 Gs, so that should be okay. And low altitude lift is 3.07 Gs, so you can get up off the ground without too much difficulty. So this should be good to go. Generally, obviously coming in and landing is more dangerous the heavier your load than getting out of atmosphere. Getting out of atmosphere, your chances of crashing are a little bit lower, but you might struggle to get up. Now, I would like to just autopilot down, so I don't want to be too close to my threshold, so I'm going to ditch a chunk of this. So I've only got 400 tons. So I built it for 550, but I'm going to do this test flight with only 400. Mostly just because I don't want to crash in the middle of my test video. So now we can hop out of build mode. Actually, I'm going to get up onto the ship before I get into it, so that when I get off, I will still be on the ship.
Startup complete.
And Alias should be right below me, so we're just going to
Landing
take off.
gear raised.
Throttle her up. And there she goes. So I've got some built-in locations for Market 6, so
Accelerating to target speed. Adjusting trajectory.
we'll just do that. I'm going to actually turn down the audio of the game a little bit because those engines are loud as heck. and we'll let Arch do its work. So yeah, that is the basics of building a ship. So now this guy will go and handle the flight on its own, because Arches is fantastic that way. I'm not fully buffed, actually, I forgot to mention that, so my container mass isn't fully buffed, but this character actually does have max buffs on all of the engine elements. So if you're trying to build a ship like this, and you're finding that it's not doing what mine did, like it's not as strong, that's because I have this. So these are all topped out across the board. Flight support technician, space engine technician, they're all topped. So now my piloting skills are not topped. So you can actually get more efficiency out of a ship than what I had here. That one's a bit of a pain. This one requires level 5 of this one, so I haven't gotten it, and I'm still working on getting container optimization on this character. I have it on another character, but that character is going to expire at some point, so I'm not planning on keeping all of my ults forever. Okay, so basically, yeah, this is a ship. That's how you build it. We covered what kind of engines you need, what kind of brake power you need, kind of adjuster power you need, wings. You got the warp drive. You want to have the surrogate pod on there and the surrogate VR stations that you can VR off, the res nodes so you can fast travel back to the ship. Got the emergency control unit. One thing I didn't do is pack scrap. I always forget to do this. Always pack scrap. Just throw it in the hold so you have it. It's nice if you can just repair the container hub and then you have access to all the scrap in your ship. Or another thing that I've been doing on a few ships recently is actually having a secondary container that I use, a gravity inverted container. I don't normally advise using those for anything, but if you have a standard complement of like scrap and cores for doing salvaging, or spare fuel, any of that kind of crap that you like to have on you fairly consistently, that means that that mass is going to like always be there. If you use it, that means something's gone wrong and you want to refill it. So that's a great use case for a gravity inverted container. So on a ship this size, I might actually have a small gravity inverted container, just an advanced gravity inverted container that I fill with scrap and spare fuel. Just as something to have as my backup stuff. Yeah, I mean, a small is pretty small. I wouldn't even be able to put a lot of like spare cores or anything in like that for salvaging, so maybe even something bigger, but a medium would be honking on this ship, so you know, do as your heart desires. So my space thrust wasn't super high, but you'll see even here I've hit up to 14,000 kilometers an hour just in the short distance down to Alioth.
Autopilot brake engaged.
Just trusting that Arches knows what it's doing here and it's braking in time. I really hope it is, and I don't crash and burn on this test video. But yeah, so that's sort of the fundamentals. Engines. Let's go over that a bit. So there's different types of engines once you get above basics. So basics are T1 engines. As soon as you hit T2 engines, they specialize. So there is military, safe, maneuver, freight. I feel like I missed one. Military, safe, maneuver, freight. Maybe that's it? I don't know. We'll go through. So military has high thrust, high fuel consumption, high resistances. So if you get shot, they take a little bit less damage, and they've got higher HP, and they generate a lot of thrust per space, basically, but they consume a ton of fuel. So as you rank up to higher and higher military engines, you'll get a lot of extra thrust, but the amount of fuel that you'll be burning through will become massive. Freight engines are sort of the opposite. So they are lighter, so the engines themselves weigh less. They generate the same amount of thrust as the basic engines, but they consume a lot less fuel. And it gets to be a lot less fuel. Safe engines on space engines, it's different on atmospheric engines. I don't know why. I feel like it's a bug.
Glide re-entry engaged.
Oh, this is cool. I haven't done this since the new update. It's hand-on a lot better. I like it. Anyways, so what was I saying? Safe engines, for space engines at least, spool up really fast, like super fast. So they're actually the fastest engines in the game. So that can be really handy for escaping atmosphere. So if you're trying to escape atmosphere, you end up hitting this situation where as you hit up below 10% atmosphere, your space engines can turn on. Okay, I said that was cool, but now it's stalled me out. At below 10% atmosphere, your space engines can turn on. But your atmospheric engines are going to be almost useless. Hang on, I'm just going to disable.
Auto orbit enabled.
Reentry progress. This is just orbiting, or are you
Auto
actually
orbit
autopiloting?
disabled. Auto orbit enabled. Glide re-entry engaged.
Cruising at 20 kilometers an hour. Okay.
Auto orbit enabled.
So
Auto orbit disabled.
something weird going on there. Let's just fling ourselves out in the atmosphere and hope for the best. So yeah, safe engines spool up really fast. So when you're trying to escape atmosphere, basically you get to that point where your atmospheric engines and wings aren't really doing much anymore because the air is so thin they can't do a lot before your space engines can come on. So basically what you need to do to escape atmosphere is build up enough momentum that you cross over that threshold and stay in that zone for long enough that your space engines can spool up and actually start projecting you outwards. 12 kilometers, my brake distance is 2 kilometers, so I'm okay still. I need to start slowing down soon. So yeah, I'm going to just focus on this for a second so I don't crash and burn my ship. Brake. And let's get some lateral movement. And we have atmosphere. Gonna angle down towards our trajectory line so the wings can kick in. Oh. Radars! I forgot to put radars on this ship. I knew I was forgetting something. So I can't see where any of the ships around me are. That is a problem. Atmospheric radar, space radar. You definitely want to have those. Right now I'm flying into a really highly populated area, and I can't really tell where other people are. If I had radars on, I could. So I'm kind of just taking this on faith here. Those brakes are not as strong as I thought they were. I'm going to do my roll brake trick to maneuver. I made a video about that as well. And there we are. So that came in
shutdown complete.
A little hotter than I would have liked. I feel like some more atmospheric brakes might be in order. Also, I apparently didn't deploy my landing gears for reasons. But yeah, that's basically how it works. So now I'm going to go back up and explain the situation that I was just trying to describe. So, oh, hello, Z Taylor 17.
Landing gear raised.
Just get out of here. Oh, he's going to. Do the good old docking bubble bounce. Don't hit the light ramp. And off we go. Now, where is my base?
Altitude hold enabled.
Yeah, I didn't put any stabilizing wings on the ship, so you see there it was trying to yaw turn and it wasn't working, and it eventually had to bank turn because I didn't put any wings on in the vertical axis for yaw turning. So that's fine. So here is exactly what I was just trying to describe. So we're getting higher and the air is getting thinner. And you see my vertical speed is, I'm starting to shed speed. So I'm going 37 meters per second upwards. So that's here. You can see that here. So it's not looking great. I'm still at 17% atmo. And it's shedding even more and more. So I don't think this is going to make it. So arches has failed me a little bit here. So I'm going to turn this off.
Autopilot disengaged.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower myself down and start dropping a little bit. And this is where safe engines could potentially be handy. I didn't quite make it to 10%, so they wouldn't have saved me on this particular run. But basically, when you first crest out to where they start to work, the safe engines would start working almost instantly, and then suddenly you'd get that extra lift and carry yourself out. As it is, I don't have that. So I need to build up some speed here, and then try and hit the altitude where the space engines start working at a faster speed. So honestly, because of the curvature of the planet, I can actually possibly just leave myself just pointing right here, because as the planet curves away from me, I'm effectively pulling up, and we'll start to lift up out of the atmosphere. See how it goes. I'll give it a second to speed up. But yeah, that's one of the main advantages of safe space engines. Militaries obviously are good for if you just need that get up and go to get up to speed really fast. Which is honestly why they're military engines, because they're good for PvP if you need to chase someone or run from someone, having the maximum amount of thrust with the minimum amount of cross-section. So there's less of you to shoot and more speed. Freights are good for if you're moving a lot of cargo, hence it's right there in the name, because that lower mass and lower fuel consumption is really helpful. So you see here now, when I came in at a much shallower angle, the atmosphere is down to 11%. I'm not going up very fast, but I'm staying fairly stable. So now I just hit 10%. So now the space engines start to be able to kick on soon. There they are. You see them start to spool up. But my Atmo engines are able to do less and less now as the atmosphere is getting lighter. But the space engines are starting to take over. And because I hit at a shallow enough angle and had enough time out there, they have had enough time to spool up. So now at this point, I can start to pull up. That may have been a little too aggressive for the amount of atmosphere that I'm at, but I know my space engines are pretty strong, so it should be okay. Arch is just hitting the brakes on me because it doesn't want me to burn up in atmosphere, because I still have some atmosphere, but now I'm clear and it should stop braking, and I should be good to go.
Autopilot to space destination.
And now I can turn the autopilot back on and should be able to handle it. So yeah, that was freight. Maneuver is basically just halfway between safe and freight. So they have the same thrust, same amount of weight as a basic or safe. It's only freights that have a different weight. And they have better fuel consumption than safes, but worse than freights. And they have better speed than freights, but worse than safes. Oh yeah, freights are also really slow to spool up. So freight space engines are not good on a ship that's going to be coming in and out of atmosphere because they take so long to get going. However, if you have a space-only ship that's never going into atmosphere, XL freights burn so little fuel compared to other options, so it'll take you a minute for them, like literally 2 minutes, for them to get up to full power and start really accelerating you. But if you're talking about like doing a slow boat trip between planets, taking an extra 2 minutes for them to really launch going on a trip that's going to take you 2 hours, it's not really the end of the world. So yeah, for long-distance space-only ships, freights are a great choice. Or just anything that you want it to be really lightweight. Where are we going? Oh, it's trying to clear line of sight with Alioth. So it's just pointing straight out. It's going to pitch me way off into nowhere near my target. So autopilot has some weaknesses. Doesn't always do exactly what you want it to do, but here we are. Yeah, so that was those. The safe atmospheric engines, for whatever reason, are useless. They're garbage. I don't know why they made spaces better and didn't change Atmos. They were all like that in beta, and nobody used safe engines for anything. But now it's a different story. I didn't show how to use the warp drive, but that's okay. You can figure that out, I'm sure. Talked about the difference between those. Hover engines also have different variants, so I forget what exactly they are. I think maneuvers have further range, and militaries have more thrust. Same kind of deal. But yeah, I think that covers basically the basics of how to build a ship. So, my previous numbers around brake force wasn't necessarily high enough. I'd suggest going a little bit higher. But other than that, the numbers were pretty solid. I dropped the amount of weight that I was carrying, and it still gave me a bit of trouble getting of atmosphere. So be aware that that's the kind of situation you're looking at, where if you want something to be... Okay, I gotta cut this out. I'm going 10,000 kilometers an hour and not the right direction.
Adjusting trajectory.
Yes, please. We're gonna break. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything you need to know about building a basic functional ship. I'm probably going to remember something in like 20 minutes, and I'll try and add a comment in the description. And as I said last time, if you've got any topics you want me to make a video about, just ping me on Discord. On the main DU Discord, I'm one of the community helpers, so you can find me there pretty easily. And hope this helped. Have a good one.